Good afternoon. I have to first apologise for you guys being bookended by two Australians today. I'll apologise on behalf of Steve and myself. I do want to thank the TJ, Dario and the whole MEF team for putting on this great event. Not only does it run smoothly every time, but the content in here is tremendous. And mixing up the speakers between those of us that are in the middle of this, talking about fraud, talking about spam, with the innovators, and really hearing some of these use cases about the value that messaging can bring to society and different groups in the community. Katie said earlier it was great for her to come here today and hear from us. I think we owe her a big thanks. Hearing and just remembering why we're doing this. The key to creating more of those use cases is going to be trust. The title of today's panel, which I thought was quite amusing, the Dutch have a good sense of humour, trust arrives by foot but leaves by horseback. Last year we commissioned some research with Mobile Squared looking at the trust of business messaging across the CPaaS community, and there was forecast to be a 25% reduction in trust in business messaging. Those same CPaaS providers were estimating about 8% of the spend from their customers was going towards fraud. So we've all talked today here about collaboration and how as an ecosystem we need to work together to address these issues and to maintain trust in business messaging. Today we have a great panel with us representing different roles in the ecosystem. So by way of introduction, I'm Dave Stewart. I head up business development for Somos. I know some of you in here know who Somos is, many of you don't. Somos runs the toll-free registry. We also operate the North American numbering plan and the reassigned number database on behalf of the FCC. What we have done over the last 5 years is developed a set of commercial services, primarily around provided trusted number information to maintain trust. 3 years ago, XConnect, a London-based company that collects number information from around the globe, became part of the Somos family. So we're marching towards that goal of being the trusted provider that drives, the provider of trusted data that drives global connections. So one of the things that we're focused on at Somos is providing that trusted data, authoritative and neutral. Somos is, we don't have any shareholders. We're not beholden. We're just perfect timing coming off that last panel. We're not beholden to investors looking for a return. We're here for the long run and we're very focused on our stakeholders. So with that, I'll hand it to Simeon for an introduction and to share a little bit about what you're doing to maintain trust in business messaging.
All right, thanks, Dave. So, Simeon, Coney. I'm with a company called Enea, although we actually used to be called Adaptive Mobile, so many of you probably know us more by that name. So when you talk about trust, I mean, for 20 years, we've been talking about security and trust working in the mobile ecosystem. I mean, we were dealing with trust issues on Simeon and Nokia devices, if those words mean anything to anyone still. So yeah, we've been sort of at the pointy end of delivering firewalling solutions. In terms of the whole sort of spectrum, I think we're sort of fairly unusual that we certainly on the operator side, we've got about a quarter of the world protected, so about 2.2 billion subscribers around the world utilize or benefit from the protection we provide. But we also sit on the aggregator side, so dealing with traffic being delivered into there. So there we've got trust not only of the operators, but also the regulator trust. But we're also working a lot with CSPs across the globe, again, dealing with now brand trust. So for us, trust actually is a variety of different aspects. It's what the users see, it's what the brands are trying to do with their customer base, and then it's everybody else in that ecosystem trying to get that conversation between those two ends without it being damaged.
There's a lot of stakeholders in this community, right? And trust needs to be built on all those fronts.
Absolutely. Any weak point breaks that.
Yeah, that's great. Caitlin.
Hello. So I'm Caitlin Long. I'm the Director of Commercial Product Management at Bandwidth. And you heard from some of our Stephanie earlier on a little bit on Bandwidth, so I won't belabor that. But generally, there's multiple levels of trust. Like you were saying, I think for me, trust kind of boils down to a relationship. Like we know each other, we trust each other, right? You buy from someone because you trust them. You sort of buy what they're selling in a sense. And that's really what KYC boils down to. So that's something that we're taking a much greater focus on strategically this year. The more volume that we see across the text channel, I think the greater potential there is for that trust to erode, just because with greater volume of something, you just start to become a little bit more tone deaf. Like we think about what happened with email. And so we obviously, as a community, we all have a vested interest in not allowing that to happen and just maintaining the integrity of the channel. And so really just focusing in strategically from a business standpoint, both in our processes, strategic investments, operations, technology, procedures, making sure that we're investing in the KYC piece, as well as actually just making sure that as we start to see more text sent across all different use cases, we're really validating that sort of wanted nature of the traffic to make it a little bit more of integrity of the channel.
And I heard a comment on a panel earlier, the further you are away from the wireless networks, the more disjointed you are. And for someone like Bandwidth, trying to do that KYC, often there's a couple of steps involved. So it's a big task to be taking on.
It is, and it's frustrating for our customers as well, but it's a partnership thing. So it's us knowing our customers and then helping guide their customers. I know, like, Sarah, you're closer to that, for example, with your end customers, and so it's the collective nature of the game that we play.
So when Simeon talks about all the different layers, there are multiple layers through this ecosystem from one end to the other.
Yeah.
Great. Sarah, do you want to?
Sure. So I'm Sarah Giraldi with Easy Texting, Director of Messaging Operations, and we do a little bit of everything. And what we do for Easy Texting when it comes to trust is really a holistic approach, because we do have that direct connection with the customer that is sending SMS. So we are looking at them from the moment they step in the door, so making sure that we have the right customers to begin with. We're monitoring for their account abuse and potential content abuse as well. So you're looking at it all the time at the same time. So it's never siloed. And you're also looking at how they're behaving, how they're using their messaging. So a very holistic approach, and yes, we are right on the front lines with our customers. So it's a little bit more comfortable, I would say, as far as being very confident and knowing this customer is good, this customer needs coaching, or this customer we need to part ways.
So we heard at the beginning and today, Dario shared there was double-digit growth in business messaging in the US. We've heard through the day some of the challenges that businesses have with getting onto the channel, with compliance, etc. What are your interactions like with your customers nowadays, Sarah? Are they still eager to get in? They understand their customers want to be connected. They want to meet them where they are. The compliance can be a challenge for them. How would you describe that landscape?
Yeah, so we know trust in messaging also, it's very big to be like, okay, we're going to keep the bad actors out. And there's a lot of effort put behind that. And everybody has their marching orders, and they know exactly what they need to be doing to prevent that. And Easy Texting takes very strong ownership in that portion of what our part is in the ecosystem. So beyond that, though, I would say another thing that builds trust in the ecosystem is also making sure that we have that good traffic going through and pumping through as well. And so for us, the conversations are very different. I can have an enterprise customer, and it's just another day in the business when I'm asking them, okay, I need you to have this, this, and this, and check box, and maybe address this, and they'll make changes, and I'll get back to you EOD, and we're good to go. The conversation is very short. When we have conversations with our SMBs, especially the smaller guys on that side of things, the conversation becomes 10 times as long. And you're trying to explain the why behind everything to get them motivated to take action. And for some of them, it's too much, and it is a blocker for them, and they're just like, okay, well, I'll just use another form of communication, and they will not use AOP SMS.
Yeah, the challenge of finding the right balance of friction in the ecosystem from the sole proprietors all the way up to large enterprises is one of the challenges that we're faced with today, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. David, do you want to jump in?
Hi, so I'm David Hassman. I'm Vice President of Cineverse's messaging products and corporate strategy. So Cineverse, this is probably one of the forums that people actually know our names, and so it's kind of nice being here. I don't have to spend a lot of time on who Cineverse is. Many of you are our customers, our partners, our vendors, right? And I think that this really speaks to the messaging ecosystem and to a lot of the stuff on how we have to work together. You know, a lot of salient points on what is trust and how we maintain trust here. And probably, you know, one of the areas that isn't so represented here today are really our customers, right? The enterprises utilizing messaging and, you know, their end users. And what we've seen and we've been working on a lot lately is with our enterprise customers, because they do not want messaging to go the way of email. They need to have that trusted channel, and they really want it to maintain that to be messaging. We heard earlier today that in parts of the world, trust has been eroded. Parts of Asia, it's eroded. They've gone to OTT and other channels. Our customers here in North America do not want that to happen. So they're working closely with us on how do we maintain the trust. They want to know what is the ecosystem doing to protect it and what can they do, right? So we're actively working with them. They want to know when their logo, their name is showing up in spam and fraudulent campaigns. What solutions can they be providing on their side? What can they be doing better? Whether it's making sure they're registering campaigns properly and things like that. So I mean, the ecosystem really wants it to work, and we're working with all parts of the ecosystem, the operators, the other aggregators, CSPs, DCAs, enterprises themselves, to provide different solutions and to, you know, I think continue to beat this drum, right? It's going to take all of us, whether it's through information sharing, the solutions we're deploying, both, you know, really cool technology solutions, but the human capital solutions, the regular human brains and eyes doing things to protect this ecosystem. So lots to unpack there, lots of great things we've heard today.
So we've heard today about some of the initiatives that are underway, some of the technologies. We've heard a lot about AI. As an industry, some of the associations are pulling us together. We're exploring some future options on how we can operate to maintain trust. Are there things that have caught your attention that you're participating in, that you see in the industry, key initiatives that you think are going to be important for us as an ecosystem to support and participate in going forward that's going to help maintain trust? And it's open to anyone.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, again, right, it was mentioned before, the secure messaging initiative. With CTI, there's another initiative going on, active initiative with some of the CPaaS vendors also on how can, you know, they bring their lens to that and continue to think. And information sharing, big topic. How do we do that? How do we do that in a way that maintains privacy, stays within the regulatory environment, but yet still share that necessary information? So I think lots going on a global basis. The FCC now has an MOU at least with their counterpart over in the UK on how, you know, regulatory bodies can start working closer together. So I think, you know, a lot going on there.
Yeah, I think we're also looking at AI just from to increase leveraging efforts on the vetting and registration piece. So if you think about just sending volumes, so, you know, we send a very large volume of A2P, 10 DLC messaging in the US, and then hopefully Canada at some point. And so when we're looking at how we're actually applying manpower and machine learning to kind of help stay ahead of the curve there, I think that that's a really great place where we can leverage human capital alongside the AI piece, and then also simultaneously kind of like check your sixes to make sure that, you know, the fraudsters aren't kind of leaping ahead of you as you're doing that. I know we had kind of talked about that on the side, like all the other things that we could be seeing. Like, for example, and this isn't AI specifically, but this is with MMS. We've actually started to see some of our customers, like a trend where the abuse of phishing, smishing, and things like that have started to creep into the actual images of the MMS messages, right? So something that would have previously gotten caught up in filters and text filters, they're actually embedding that in the image. Now, that is something that AI, they actually said now that AI can better identify those stupid little pictures, you know, with the bicycles, like pick out how many bicycles, pick out how many sailboats. AI is better at doing that than a human now. Yeah. And so if AI can do that, well, maybe they can start catching these MMS messages. So anyway, a long, rambly way to say we're looking at sort of both angles at the same time.
Yeah, it's interesting, the idea of using AI on the vetting side up front. You know, that's an
Yeah.
arduous manual. There's a lot of human resource involved in that. And I think Vincent did a good job earlier on today talking about how you can streamline and make our jobs easier. AI is not replacing us, but it can be augmented. I
Right.
think that'd be a really interesting space to look at.
Yeah, I mean, well, I was going to say, so we've been talking about AI. I've got to throw in another acronym. AI.
Sure, why not?
T.
Yeah.
I mean, really interesting that I've actually not heard AIT spoken about here. Yeah, I mean, and it's not artificial intelligence, it's artificial inflation of traffic. I'm going to bring it up. Does not really today apply to North America, to the US, but I do spot there's an S in the conference title here, so it does apply to the +1 territories, the Caribbean. They are suffering elements of AIT. Most definitely, we're seeing it very, very active across Latin America as well. And I would say that this is actually a threat. I mean, we've spoken a lot about...
I'm sure most people know what
I'll
AIT
explain
is.
what it is.
Just very quickly.
Yeah, because I was going to say, we've been talking about threats to the consumer, but you know, you're talking about your trust report and the brands are spending.
Yeah.
AIT is fraud against brands. It's a way of defrauding them and their spend, because they have big pockets. They are spending, what, 34 billion a year on A2P messaging. It's a way of fraudsters starting to try and capture some of that. In fact, I mean, to size it, it was about a $1.1 billion problem last year. $1.1 billion were taken out of the A2P ecosystem purely due to artificial inflation of traffic. So I think in terms of trust, we are seeing most definitely brands' loss of confidence in certain types of mobile messaging that, if we're not careful, could result in very quick, dramatic traffic changes. I mean, we are starting to see that again in some regions. I mean, you're speaking earlier, David, about sort of the app changes. I think some of that is symptoms of that. So, I mean, in terms of initiatives, we've seen things in the i3 forum about AIT, but it certainly feels that it's caught a lot of folks unaware. It's really come from absolutely nowhere over the last sort of 18, 24 months to become, I would say, not a North American problem, but a rest of world probably number one priority.
I think we have seen it creeping in. So XConnect has a white paper on one of our customers based in the US, large e-commerce company, $60 million we saved them pretty much overnight by validating some of the terminating two-factor messages that they were sending. And some of these e-commerce companies are spending hundreds of millions of dollars on messaging just for two-factor authentication. So it is creeping in, and to your point you were making earlier, trust in the ecosystem has to exist on multiple fronts, and that's a really good example of where it can be very expensive to the enterprises. Right.
Yeah, sure.
Sarah?
So I think for initiatives, you know, there's always room for improvement. And it sounds like everybody in this room is doing everything they can on a regular basis. But I think what's also important, it was said earlier, is you never stop, and you make sure that you always have a pulse check. Even if you have something in place that works really well, it's never a silver bullet. So you need to make sure that you're constantly feeding it data. You constantly have, you know, human involvement as well and decision making on it, so it does continue to work as smooth as possible, and always looking for improvements.
Yeah, there's definitely no silver bullet. It's going to take multiple solutions, initiatives, fixes to maintain trust. And as an ecosystem, we need to keep working on that. So TJ said it really well earlier. If we don't fix it, the FCC will. The panel earlier this morning, I think, gave a really clear picture of the amount of regulation and enforcement that the FCC has stepped up to, really since the Trace Act, again, just in the US, but since the Trace Act was put into place. And it's escalating significantly. There was a long list that Glenn shared, and there's one that he actually missed, which was announced last week, that DNO for texting has a compliance date of September 3rd this year. So that law was passed last April. It was stuck in some bureaucracy. I'd love to bore you with it if you had 20 minutes. But it finally came out 2 weeks ago, and now that's going to be in place. So sort of an opening question to the panel, but on the regulatory side, if you want to touch on the DNO texting as an example, but how should we be thinking as an ecosystem, as a market, to work with the government? What are some of the things that we should be doing, and what are the implications of the regulation that is being effectively handed down to us?
Someone brought up stir shaken earlier, I think, and I previously have been on the voice side of our business, and so I saw the inefficiencies and sort of maybe the fit for purpose of stir shaken. I think that maybe you said this in a prior conversation where it was everyone thought it was going to be just a silver bullet for unwanted robocalls. And so I think that that's a great lesson to learn from the sort of the stir shaken that came before us, where there's not this one framework that we can all implement that will sort of solve all our woes.
Set appropriate expectations.
Right.
Good start.
So expectation management key. And then also it's understanding that the purpose of these NPRMs that are being issued and the FPNRMs is to elicit discussion and commentary. And so if everyone in this room is not actively participating in that in some form or fashion, I think that is a miss. So that is an actual action item that we can take through trade organizations, through your individual groups, organizations, is to help give guidance where it's being asked, because I think it's part of it as well. It's if we kind of leave it alone, it'll go away. I think we've seen that's not the case.
That's right. Yeah. If you ignore it, it's just yeah.
I was going to say, I want to jump in on, I think DNO is probably going to be another great illustration. So anybody challenge me if I'm wrong here, but DNO, from what I saw in the last version of the list, has, well, when it was first created, it has about 1,100 entries on that list that was formed in 2022. Guess how many entries were added in 2023?
600.
1. So to Mike's point earlier, that security standards cannot stand still. This stuff has to be reviewed on a daily basis. DNO is clearly not going to be a silver bullet. I think now when we start to look at the FCC regulation talking about unallocated, unassigned, we're now talking about several million numbers. But if you're an attacker, are you going to use one of those 1,100 numbers? No, of course you're going to use something else that is not going to be screened for. So again, I think absolutely sort of setting appropriate expectations on what it does and the fact that it's a step, but we have to keep working on that journey to get the proper protection.
You're absolutely right. It's plugging a hole. Once we plug the hole, the fraudsters will move off. I think the DNO today covers about 52% of number ranges that could be used. And if they're randomly generating these numbers, there's a chance they're going to hit on that. I think the Somos DNO list now is about 6 billion numbers.
Yeah.
So unallocated, unsigned, invalid, and then subscriber listed on top of that. But it's not the silver bullet. It feels like table stakes. If you have a call in particular or a message coming across your network that has one of those numbers on there, it's binary. It should be either shut down or you should be pulling it aside and having a closer look at it. There's not a lot of analytics in there, and then we can move on to the next hole to plug, right? That's part of it.
I think it's clear, right? The FCC is not going to come up with the solution, right? And to why we have to educate them. Now, they are the body that can enact the solution across the board, right? But they don't have a bunch of black hats thinking of how are we going to defeat the bad guy, right? They're not going to do that. Even going back to the political texting panel a couple panels ago, we heard that the political actors, right, the politicians looking to get elected and the companies working with them, they have a problem just figuring out this ecosystem, let alone coming up on how to build solutions on how to fix it and protect it, right? So it is incumbent upon us to educate them how the ecosystem works, our ideas for protecting these ecosystems that can be put out in a level playing field to get spread far and wide to get enacted. So a little bit softer there in terms of some things we can do, but I think equally important.
Yeah, I think Kevin Rupee was saying earlier, get involved, get involved, get involved. They're very open to it, they're looking for it, they're asking for it, and there's plenty of channels that can be used to get that communications into the FCC and have your opinion heard. Now, so there was a lot of conversation today about RCS, the future of RCS. From a trust perspective, what does RCS mean for trust in the long run? Are there risks, are there additional fraud vectors that come because of that? Is it going to build trust because it's going to be more of an interactive conversation between businesses and their consumers? What does RCS mean for trust in business messaging going forward?
Well, I can jump in with personal experience. Firstly, we saw when one of the first networks launched RCS, attackers loved it. They were rate restricted on SMS. Suddenly they had this spam cannon. In fact, some of them didn't even realize how quickly they could send. So, RCS creates so much opportunity for them. We saw attacks that were using the capability to use an account, a non-SIM authenticated device to start sending messages, again, utilizing RCS. The thing that now scares the hell out of me is the fact that RCS with certain defaults is now moving to end-to-end encrypted. Brilliant for privacy, but an utter nightmare for security because nobody now has the ability to ensure that the sending party is doing the right thing to the recipient party. And again, we are seeing behaviors today on RCS. And we talk about RCS P2P and RCS RBM. The reality is it goes to the same inbox. You know, subscribers do not know the difference. And I really fear that this sort of clouding of this and sometimes missing that point will mean that we'll see attacks from one entirely different ecosystem actually affecting subscribers and they're not able to be aware of that. But more importantly, we will not be able to defend ourselves. Nobody in that chain will be able to defend.
That's a concern. David, you got a perspective on that?
You know, there's certainly the technical vectors, but I think there is, again, kind of putting the human factor back into it in terms of, you know, from the A to P standpoint, in terms of vetting the enterprises and the campaigns. Again, I think it's another opportunity for us, as it is still the early days, to make sure we are putting, you know, the proper safeguards and measures in place to get our hands around the ecosystem as it starts to form. Again, some of it may be technical solutions, but some of it may be process solutions. But we do have to be careful, again, to look for that balance to not discourage adoption of the technology because we put so many gates up there. Early days, and yeah, there has been some early badness coming into the ecosystem that we're all racing, you know, to get ahead of. Will we get there? Absolutely. But like with anything, right, it's going to be continued constant vigilance because the bad guys are just going to keep on morphing and moving in a different direction. So,
Sarah, is RCS getting any attention in the SMB market? Do you hear a lot of questions about it?
Oh yeah, for sure. Everybody's excited about RCS. You know, even if it's as simple as having their logo up there, you know, just connecting with their consumers in a much more comfortable, trusted way. Mm-hmm. So there is excitement about that. I do worry about what the implications are when it does come to monitoring for fraudulent behavior or just bad actors. So yeah, it's a concern. I think we also need to just ask our partners that have already been in RCS for a while, what have they seen? What is the concerns that have come up or they've caught in action? I think there's some things that we could learn from that.
That's a great point. Sharing of data has been a theme throughout today, hasn't it? Right,
and I feel that we started this out with collaboration. We don't get to a better endpoint unless we do share information to a certain degree.
Right, and we talked a minute ago about the privacy concerns around that, but at the end of the day, once the privacy concerns have been taken care of, we need to get comfortable with sharing the information around the ecosystem. And Caitlin, this is something close to you, right?
Yeah, and I think you were talking about this a little bit earlier when you were talking about managing expectations of customers. That's just been sort of a theme, a sub-theme of our panel is managing expectations. And we know when Apple's announcement is coming, right, mm-hmm. for generally speaking. We know that it's probably going to be sometime in the fall when they release their hardware. They're going to also do this sort of software release, pushing it out, opening up a larger end user base for the actual RCS channel. And so we know that's on the horizon. And if we're expecting and anticipating, we're all having customer conversations. Customer conversations are escalating. There is an appetite now. I think I saw a stat, the amount of billable transactions on some of these OTT channels are going up. You can expect that same type of similar rich engagement on RCS and RBM as well. We know it's coming, and so why don't we be proactive versus reactive and actually create sort of the structure that we want to see? I think it will be a lot easier for customers to adopt. We'll see better KYC compliance because what I see from my customer's perspective, it's not a lack of willingness to comply. It's the fact that it's simply changing so frequently. The goalposts are constantly moving. It's just the fact that they don't know what the goal is. The target is really tough to pin down. And so I think that that's something that we could be doing right now, setting that, creating those expectations, processes, that way we're ready.
Yeah, predictability is key, especially when you get into the smaller businesses in the long part of the market. All right, last question. Crystal ball. 12, 24 months out? What does this space look like? When we return here in 2 years' time, what are we going to be talking about? Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Okay, so 2 years out from now, I just want to be able to say we have stability in the market, and goes along with that predictability. So for our small businesses, I know for Easy Texting, we were one of the first in the market to move our entire DSC base to 10 DLC, and with that came a lot of moves along the way, as far as not everything quite was built out, and there was a lot of other initiatives afterwards, a lot of other extra requirements. So we moved our customers and we were, okay, provide X, Y, and Z. And then maybe 6 months down the line, okay, but now we need A, B, and C. And so it kept kind of trickling down, and we kind of really, pulled our customers through the mud with us. And I mean, some stuck around and some didn't.
And they'd like to get back to
Yeah,
talking
so
with their
think-
customers, messaging with their customers, right? Get all this stuff out of the way, get it predictable, know what they have to do
Yeah.
so they can focus on their business.
Yeah, and I know we've already heard earlier, there's a lot more coming out in 2024. So it's, there will be changes, like we will be agile and we will adjust. But I think there's a little bit that we can control internally as well to create that stability.
Great, thank you. Crystal balls, anyone?
Stability, no further comment. I love that one. I'll second that.
Okay.
Hopeful vote.
I think messaging is going to continue to become part of, the lexicon and the way people use it. I think they're going to continue to develop new ways to use it. I think the conversational nature of it is going to continue to increase. Just looking at, taking my family as a sample of one, everybody in my family now has a messaging device. Whether it's my youngest son with his iWatch and talking into it, to my 82-year-old father. I mean, it is, whether this is good or bad, it is the standard way our family and our extended family communicate. And that's going to go into how are they going to communicate with their financial institutions, their friends, their e-marketing companies. And as long as we continue to maintain the trust, that'll continue to grow.
Yep.
But the minute I start getting worried and not sleeping at night because I'm worried either about my youngest son or my father have something bad to them, that's going to shut off. But I think, with the discussions here, I think there's a lot of smart people looking at this, a lot of smart people doing things. I think this is going to continue to grow as a channel. Trust, as, I think it's in the Harry Potter movie, is constant vigilance. We cannot take our foot off the brake or foot off the gas 1 minute in attacking the bad guy and continue to build trust.
Certainly in 2 years' time, you're going to be talking trust and security. I mean, it will be absolutely still a theme. I think we'll be looking back and going, okay, right, that was the effect of trust 2 years ago, and this is how it has affected. I think there'll be pros, there'll be cons. I think there'll be definitely questions of can we trust content, not just can we trust the source. Was that video I saw actually real? Was that, that content, not just that text, but that rich media, was that real? And I think we'll end up with a lot more challenges of that sort of nature. No idea who's going to solve that one, because there's only so many relationships that we can validate. We can't validate the information itself. Security, again, absolutely guaranteed. I have no idea what it's going to be in 2 years' time.
Okay, same themes though, different technology.
Absolutely.
Can I put in a wish list, though? Is a wish list
Sure
the same as a
can.
crystal ball?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the swim lane tagging is really important for that. So kind of to everyone's point, is being able to identify different use cases and tag that more at a meta level across the industry, right? And so that's going to be something that I think we could all get better at, and maybe, from the conversations I've seen, being able to identify healthcare, education, and not sort of templatize it all in such a similar fashion will be key to maintaining conversational channels and creating stability as well.
Yeah, I'm sure that's music to Sarah's ears as well. Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thank you, panel, very much for spending your time with us here today. And if you wouldn't mind, please join me in thanking you.